Hello there and welcome to Paradox Church. I want you to know that wherever you are, I miss you. Unless we haven't met, then I can't wait to meet you, is what I will say. But either way, we are glad that you have joined us this Saturday morning here for Church Online at Paradox Church. A couple of things before we get started. If you've been with us before, this will be a bit of a review. But if you are here for the first time, we are glad that you are here. Every week here at Paradox, we take a live survey. And this survey today is actually a recap of what we've been talking about in our series in 1st and 2nd Chronicles. So they're all questions based on what we've talked about in the past weeks. Now, if this feels like a quiz, I want you to know that all answers are anonymous. We have no way of tracking this back. But we just love for you to see how much you remember or how much you don't know or how much you forgot. It's all okay. We'll kind of laugh about it. And we'll go from there. But we would love for you to take our survey at pollev.com/paradoxredlands. Even if you've never been to Paradox before, we'd love for you to do this survey because we just find this is a good way for us to interact despite the distance between us. Also, every week at Paradox, we do one song of lamentation and one song of celebration each week because we don't know what kind of week you've had. So we want to be able to sing with you in the midst of your experience, whether you experience the highs or lows of life. So with that in mind, in just a few moments, we'll invite Pablo Ariza to share a lamentation, and then we will sing a song of lamentation together. During that song, we invite you to write your comments on the video below about lamentations or things that you've been struggling with. And then right after that, we are excited to welcome Simone DeShields to lead us in celebration, as we then will sing a song of celebration, and you will share your celebrations with us at that time. So we are so glad that you have joined us here at Paradox this morning, and at this time we'll turn it over to Pablo, who will lead our congregation in lamentation.
Hey Paradox, Pablo here. I'm going to be sharing a lamentation, and it has to do with something that I think maybe a lot of us could relate to, just because it has to do with what's been happening in the last couple of weeks with the elections and the build up to it and the aftermath. And it has mostly to do with people who I really care about in my life, people who I love very much, and some loved ones. And what I'm lamenting is just what all those things that have been happening the last weeks, how it's really affected our relationship. And I'm part of that too. And so I think what's really been apparent and kind of made me feel like disbelief and frustration and it has to do with a lot of things that I see as conspiracies, some narratives that are very just hyper partisan, and and then add to that religion and how faith has played a role in this one, and how all that has affected people in my life. And it's been a challenge for me, because I know that what's at the bottom of a lot of what we're experiencing is fear, and whether that's real fear or perceived fear, it's really discouraging when you see people's fears being taken advantage of, people being manipulated, and when that's your loved one, that really it gets you, and it feels even more challenging when you feel like you can't do anything about it, because it's hard to have a conversation and to be understood, to be heard, and it's just been a challenge. So what I'm lamenting is, yes, what is happening in our relationships, and more of a personal level, I'm lamenting that there's been some interactions with people that I love a lot, that I have not had that kind of empathy that is needed for that conversation. If I recognize people are experiencing fear or being taken advantage of, I know I could have done a better job expressing empathy, because there's other things going on in people's lives that don't have to do with the elections and things around that. Some people are dealing with deeper things, stuff that is more heartbreaking that's going on in their personal life, and in those instances, I fail to express empathy that they need for what's going on in their life, because I've allowed myself to kind of be overwhelmed with what's happening the last couple weeks with the election. So that's what I'm lamenting and hoping to learn from going into this week. But yeah, thanks for hearing me share my lamentation.
Hope you know how much I love you. never did. No, no. 'Cause I'm not scared of imperfections or the questions in your head. Just know that you will always be enough. 'Cause you tried, and I saw you wrestle with every how, every why. I was right there listening. So just lean into the mystery, and I'll meet you here in the melody. So child, would you try again? My child, would you try again? Oh child, would you love again?
Hello, my name is Simone DeShields, and this week I'm doing a celebration. So I just finished my third year of medical school at Loma Linda, and this year I decided to do my master's in public health, which I'm very, very excited about. It's been such a breath of fresh air, and I think I've really been able to see God's hand along this journey. There's so many moments that are just providential that I couldn't have thought of in a better way for certain things to happen that have just happened. So just a little bit of background. A few months ago, I was able to organize and lead out a vigil or protest demonstration, whatever we're going to call it, at Loma Linda. And since then, I've just been I felt as though I was called, I guess, to do something more. And I've been able to work on a project in my master's in public health program, and it's just been such an amazing, amazing experience. I think I've been really excited to be able to address different issues I'm very passionate about, like social justice and addressing healthcare disparities too, through this project. So it's been a very amazing experience. One of the things I'm most excited about and would love to celebrate is that God put a Black resident in my path to work on this project with. She's very amazing, and it's just a very, very meaningful experience being able to work with someone that looks like me, that's passionate about what I am, that I don't have to explain certain things to. So I'm very, very blessed and just thankful for that opportunity. I think another thing I'm very, very thankful for is being able to have freedom and I guess just agency in this path, being able to address what I am passionate about without feeling like I'm stepping on toes or being offensive. Or I'm just really excited about the time we're in right now, because I feel like people are really excited to see change, seeing racism being addressed. I'm really excited that we're actually allowed to speak about that openly, because it's something that I've had to deal with my whole life. And finally now our people are apparently passionate about it as well. So it's been a really important time right now. I think another thing I'd like to celebrate is being able to, I kind of said this before, but just do something in my education that's really meaningful, that I'm able to make a difference, I feel like, in the years to come.
I love you, Lord, for your mercy never fails me. All my days sleepless nights. You are close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend. I have lived in the goodness of God. Yes, and all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, Lord, I will sing of the goodness of God. You're so good. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me, yes, God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laying down, I surrender now. I give everything. Lord. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Oh, your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Oh, your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I surrender now. I'll give you everything. Your goodness is running, it keeps running after me. And all my life you have been faithful. Oh, and all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Yes, God, all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God.
I invite you to pray with me. Dear God, we take a moment to say thank you for this beautiful gift called life. And while it's easy for us to be grateful when everything is going our way, our prayer this morning is that you may comfort us in our weirdness, so that one day we may be able to say, thank you for all that life has to offer. In your name we pray. Amen. We are going to turn it over to Craig now as he reads our survey results.
Wow, thank you so much to Caitlin and the fantastic prayer team, worship team for all that they did to put that music together. It's very moving to me this week, and I just appreciate so much all the time and energy that goes into that. So thank you. Thank you also to all of you for participating in our worship service, whether it's through the live poll, which we'll go over in a second, or by sharing your lamentations and celebrations. And I'm just so glad that you are here with us this morning and worshiping through the internet together with us. So let's look at the survey results. Let's see how much people have possibly remembered from this series in 1st and 2nd Chronicles and how we're doing. And if you missed any of these, it's okay. This was all meant to kind of be fun as well. So the first question was, in the Bible, there are 43 reigning monarchs of Judah, Israel. Who was the only reigning queen? No one selected Karen, but the overwhelming majority of you got it right with Athaliah, who is the only queen in all of Judah and Israel's history. While Jezebel was a queen of Israel, she was not a reigning queen. She was the wife of King Ahab, who was the ultimate authority in Israel. But Athaliah rose up, which we talked about last week, and became the only reigning queen in Judah, Israel's history. Second question, how many of God's prophets told Jehoshaphat and Ahab to go to war with Aram, even though they eventually lost to Aram in that war? The correct answer is 400, with one prophet who said otherwise. That prophet got prophet slapped, which was a term that we were introduced to a couple weeks ago. And that's the story that happened. It's a pretty wild story when 400 prophets of God say go, and it leads to their destruction. The next question is, when Abijah was surrounded and facing certain defeat in the Battle of Mount Zemaraim, what military unit did he command to act that eventually led to his victory? Most of you got the right answer, which is yes, the trumpeters. They blasted their trumpets, they didn't fight back, and all of a sudden God leveled them and killed a lot of soldiers, 500,000 Israelite soldiers, I believe, and that raises all sorts of questions, which we talked about a couple weeks ago. One more question about Chronicles is, why was David's wife Michal angry at David in 2 Samuel? Some people put because he withheld financial aid from Ukraine. That's somebody else. The correct answer, though, was because he exposed himself to other women without their consent. That is correct, and we're glad that you remembered that part. That was a pretty horrifying story from Michal's perspective, but we talked about her bravery and her willingness to confront the king in that story. Which leads us to the last question, which is, how are you doing in 2020? 22% of you said, I'm encouraged and well, life is good. This sermon today is not for you. Keep doing what you're doing. I'm really proud of you, and I may need to call you and ask for tips. I personally answered the second one. While times are tough, I'm hopeful for the future. Some of you answered, I'm numb, I can no longer feel joy or sorrow. And some of you answered, I'm currently living through the worst year of my life. Today's sermon is for anyone who's having a hard time feeling hope. And I want you to know before we go any further that if you are in this bottom category, or if you're feeling like it's difficult to have hope, Pastor Mandy and I are still available via calls or FaceTime or Zoom to talk to you, just so that you know that you are not alone in whatever you're going through in 2020, because this is a tough year. And so this sermon today is written to anyone who is struggling to feel hope. And I want you to know that we're here for you as your pastoral staff in any way that we can be during this difficult time. Now, before we jump into this sermon, got a couple of announcements, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So we'll go from there. Yep, try that again. There we are. So the first announcement is every Saturday here at Paradox, we do communion together, and we want to invite you to participate in this. It helps bring a few more senses into play when we do communion together, despite this remote church. So we want to invite you to find anything to eat or drink and to be part of this sacrament, which is communion. We'll do that at the end of the service. Also want to say thank you to everyone who continues to support this ministry by generous donations at paradoxgiving.com. We really appreciate your willingness to still believe in this ministry, despite the fact that we are a remote church at this time. Also, we want to let you know that if you've never been here before, you can find out more about our church at paradoxredlands.com. And if you've been with us before, you know that every week we have kids and youth at 9:30. Paradox Kids started a new series called A Grateful Heart. Then we do church, which is happening now. And then every week after the sermon, we have a discussion group over Instagram Live at our handle, which is at paradoxredlands. We'd love for you to join us there, because I'm going to say something in this sermon you're probably going to disagree with. And here at Paradox, what makes us a little different than most churches is that sermons at Paradox are designed to start discussions and not end them. And so we want this sermon and the ideas presented here to start a discussion, and you can continue that discussion on Instagram Live. You can ask me any question you want about the sermon. If you feel like I missed a point or I skipped over something, please bring those questions to discussion group. We have a great time on Instagram Live, and we'd love to see you there and continue the discussion that is started in 2 Chronicles, which is the book that we are currently studying. Now, in today's sermon, we are going to discuss the lives of two kings. The first king is David's distant descendant, a man named King Ahaz. And the second king is Ahaz's son and successor, King Hezekiah. For a little bit of context, 300 years passes between the first day of David's reign and the first day of Hezekiah's reign. For even more perspective, we will then celebrate America's 300th anniversary on 2076. So when you think of this story, consider the gap between George Washington and whoever will be the president in 56 years. That president is the equivalent of King Hezekiah in this story. Now, Ahaz reigned for a little over 15 years in the 8th century BCE, while his son Hezekiah wore the crown for nearly 30 years. So with all of this information in mind, let's dive into the story of King Ahaz, told in 2 Chronicles chapter 28. We read, King Ahaz reigned for 16 years in Jerusalem. He did not do what was right in the sight of the Lord, as his ancestor David had done, but he walked in the ways of the kings of Israel. Now, this may seem a little confusing, but it's important to remember that this story with Israel and Judah, this story occurs when they are separate nations. 200 years before the reign of King Ahaz, his ancestor Rehoboam sat on the throne. Shortly after he received the crown, the people of his nation asked Rehoboam to abolish the practice of slavery. Rehoboam refused and swore that he would expand his nation's enslavement of men, women, and children in an effort to build a stronger economy. Not surprisingly, Rehoboam's political platform of enslaving his own people was not well received by his own people. Therefore, 10 out of the 12 tribes of Israel seceded from the Union and formed their own nation named Israel. Rehoboam continued to reign on the southern kingdom of Judah in the capital city of Jerusalem. Now fast forward 200 years, and the nations of Judah and Israel are still separate and sovereign nations. At this point in their history, they have made a couple of alliances, but the overwhelming theme of their narrative is one of terrible civil war. When Ahaz assumes the throne, these nations are in the height of a violent and bloody conflict. So when we read in 2 Chronicles that King Ahaz of Judah walks in the ways of his enemy Israel, this is about as low as the author of Chronicles can go to describe the moral bankruptcy of Ahaz. After all, imagine that in 2076, on the 300-year anniversary of the United States of America, the press unanimously describes the President of the United States as, quote, walking in the ways of the Confederacy. Those are words that can only be used if you are talking about the worst kind of president. And that's the kind of words that the author of Chronicles uses to describe the worst kind of king, which for the author is King Ahaz. Now we must remember that the author of Chronicles is writing all of this sometime around the year 350 BC. This means that 400 years have passed between the life of King Ahaz and the time that the author of Chronicles writes these words about King Ahaz. This is significant because it means that the author of Chronicles already knows how the story of King Ahaz will end. So when the author starts the story of King Ahaz by telling us about the abhorrence of King Ahaz, then you and I can easily anticipate that things are about to spiral out of control. And my word, do things ever spiral out of control for King Ahaz. In verse 5, the nation of Aram attacks and defeats a portion of Judah. Aram then takes several prisoners of war back with them to Damascus. In that same verse, Judah's old nemesis, Israel, continues the civil war that's 2 centuries old and attacks Judah from the north. According to the author of Chronicles, King Ahaz and Judah met a heavy defeat at the hands of Israel with great slaughter. How great was this slaughter? We read King Pekah of Israel killed 120,000 in Judah in one day, all of them valiant warriors because they had abandoned the Lord, the God of their ancestors. But King Pekah of Israel also took prisoners of war from Judah. Verse 8 reads, the people of Israel took captive 200,000 of their kin, women, sons, and daughters. They also took much booty from them and brought the booty to Samaria, the capital of Israel. In just one battle, King Ahaz loses 320,000 soldiers. 120,000 are killed, and the remaining 200,000 are taken as prisoners of war. Aram and Israel absolutely pummel the neighboring nation of Judah. And just when we think Ahaz and Judah cannot possibly take any more, the hits keep on coming. In verse 17, we read, the Edomites had again invaded and defeated Judah and carried away captives. For Judah, there are 3 nations, 3 wars, and 3 defeats. Can you imagine what the national morale in Judah is like after losing to the Edomites, their 3rd military loss in a row? I mean, things can't possibly get any worse, right? Wrong. The verse continues, and the Philistines had made raids on the cities in the Shephelah and the Negeb of Judah, and had taken Beth Shemesh, Aijalon, and Gederoth, Soko with its villages, Timnah and its villages, and Gimzo with its villages, and they settled there. While King Ahaz is on the throne, 4 different nations mercilessly attack Judah from 4 different sides. Israel from the north, Aram from the east, Edom from the south, and the Philistines from the west. All 4 of these surrounding nations defeat Judah in battle. The national morale of Judah during Ahaz's reign is at an all-time low. They are utterly and completely dejected. Their cities are under the rule of other nations. They cannot negotiate a treaty, an alliance, or a peace with another nation, no matter how hard they try. And every time Judah goes to battle, I imagine there is an ominous sense of dread that they will lose. King Ahaz and all of Judah are frantic for any kind of help. In their desperation, Ahaz goes for broke and offers what little money he has left to the biggest military superpower of his day, the Empire of Assyria. We read these words, for Ahaz plundered the house of the Lord and the houses of the king and of the officials, and gave tribute to the king of Assyria. But it did not help him. This tribute to Assyria did not help Ahaz because Assyria heard Judah say, Assyria, help us. We are on the brink of destruction. And Assyria, ever the empire, thought, the brink of destruction? Well, why don't we destroy Judah and take whatever they have left for ourselves? And with that, Assyria begins to plot how they will destroy Judah. The author of Chronicles describes Ahaz as being overwhelmed with distress because, he's managed to tick off the biggest and baddest military in the 8th century BCE. Shortly after this blunder, but before Assyria arrives, Ahaz passes away. Ahaz led the nation of Judah for 16 years. And according to the author of Chronicles, his legacy is one of ineptitude. In particular, Ahaz is completely inept at 2 things. Number 1, he's inept at foreign policy. Number 2, Ahaz is inept at military strategy. For 16 years, the people of Judah weathered a storm of ineptitude from their head of state. And now that Ahaz is dead, they are broke, they are weak, and the empire of Assyria is sending a steady stream of messengers that they need to be prepared to surrender to Assyria or they will be destroyed. Quite simply, the people of Judah are in the depths of despair in 715 BCE. If you ever felt like 2020 CE is a terrible year, like things can't possibly get any worse than they are right now, and then tomorrow happens and lo and behold, things got worse, just because it's the year 2020? If you feel this way, well then 715 BCE is your spiritual annual sibling. To explain what I mean by a spiritual annual sibling, let's assume that you believe in an afterlife. I invite you to imagine all of humanity in heaven sitting around an epic bonfire. After a while, you start talking to the person next to you at this bonfire, and that person then asks you a question in conversation. So they ask you, what's the worst year that you survived on your Earth? You then launch into an answer that's kind of laughing, kind of crying, recounting what happened in the year 2020. Now, you don't know this person, but this person politely allows you to finish. And after a minute of silence, they say to you, oh, you think 2020 was bad? Well, let me tell you about 715 BCE. They then describe to you in detail what that year was like for them. And you say the phrase, no way, about 172 times. As this ancient person is telling you the story, they kind of laugh and they also kind of cry as they say, 715 BCE was the worst. And after a few moments, you realize that you really like this person and you are going to be friends because you are bonded by the fact that you both endured years when the suffering just would not stop. Well, that's what I mean by 715 BCE is our spiritual annual sibling. Once we can see that, we then can lean into this story. Because this story is about what people did when they experienced a hellacious year here on earth. And maybe, just maybe, this is a good story. And maybe this story might be able to offer some kind of wisdom for how we can possibly live in the year 2020. So in 715 BCE, the people of Judah are living in the depths of despair. They crown a new king, Ahaz's son, Hezekiah. Hezekiah is just 25 years old. In his first speech after his coronation, Hezekiah audaciously says to a weary people, "My sons, do not now be negligent, for God has chosen you to stand in God's presence, to minister to God, and to be God's ministers, and make offerings to God." In other words, Hezekiah tells his beleaguered people, hey Judah, you know what I have? I have hope. Now, how do you think that this speech about hope was received by the people of Judah in 715 BCE? I picture people responding to Hezekiah by shooting back, oh, you have hope, Hezekiah? Well, that's adorable. Because I'm not sure if you are aware of this, Hezekiah, but Assyria, the most powerful empire in the region, is planning a military campaign right now against us. And Hezekiah, I don't know if you remember, but we just lost 4 battles in a row. We don't stand a chance against the Assyrians. Where do you get the nerve, Hezekiah, to stand up here and say, well, Judah, you've been chosen for this moment? I picture this speech being met with eye rolls, sneers, and great skepticism. But here's what's important. Hezekiah refused to be deterred in his hope because he went about his life and his reign believing one of the most unlikely things imaginable. Hezekiah believed that Judah could beat Assyria. This is almost laughable to say out loud, because Judah doesn't have money and Judah doesn't have a military. But Hezekiah actually believed this, that his tiny nation of Judah could and would prevail against the strongest army in the land. Over the next several years, Hezekiah governed over Judah with this conviction close to his heart. We read Hezekiah planned with his officers and his warriors to stop the flow of the springs that were outside the city in case of an Assyrian siege. We then read in the text, and his officers helped him. So now Hezekiah not only believes that Judah can prevail over Assyria, he now has his officers believing this crazy idea as well. Not only that, but Hezekiah laid out a grand vision of engineering and commissioned his laborers to dig a massive tunnel. This tunnel ensured that the people of Jerusalem would have access to running and clean water if the Assyrians showed up and placed them under siege. While the Assyrians would have their water dammed, all of Jerusalem would have access to water through this temple. And when you combine this tunnel with that plan, Jerusalem all of a sudden has the ability to have access to water when Assyria does not. Now, I took this picture in Hezekiah's tunnel when I visited Jerusalem in 2010. It's a remarkable feat of engineering. But even more so, it's a remarkable feat of hope. Hezekiah got all of these people to dig this massive tunnel with the conviction that Judah could somehow, some way, do something about their fate against the approaching Assyrian army. This tunnel is a physical manifestation of Judah's hope from 2,700 years ago. And I had the privilege and the honor of standing in the shadow of that hope. Now, this tunnel alone is not enough to beat the Assyrians, and Hezekiah is not done. We read, Hezekiah set to work resolutely and built up the entire wall that was broken down. He raised towers on it, and outside it he built another wall. He also strengthened the millow in the city of David and made weapons and shields in abundance. So Hezekiah rebuilt and reinforced the defensive wall around Jerusalem and started a mass production of defensive weapons in preparation for a siege. All of these people who worked on the wall and who crafted weapons had to be pulled out of the depths of their despair and into the heights of national hope. But Hezekiah is still not done. He continually attempts to negotiate a peace with Assyria. He has not abandoned diplomacy. His creative and committed diplomacy is recorded in the book of 2 Kings. And for 14 years, Hezekiah woke up every morning and told the people of Judah, I know things look grim, but we aren't done. I believe that we can beat Assyria. 14 years, day in and day out, Hezekiah continually offered hope to the people of Judah. This hope, though, was not enough, because this hope was also built on action. And this hope required the people of Judah to do something rather than passively accept their fate. And every day for 14 years, the people of Judah prepared for a siege at the hands of Assyria, which is exactly what happened in 701 BCE, when the nightmare became a reality. Assyria, led by King Sennacherib, marched on Jerusalem. Assyria then surrounded the city and placed the metropolis under siege. Now imagine living in Jerusalem during this time. No matter what wall you went to or what direction you looked, whenever you gaze out beyond the city, all you can see are rows and rows and rows of Assyrian soldiers. All of them were just sitting there, waiting for you to starve to death so that they could conquer your city. With that anxiety in the air, Hezekiah quickly acts. We read, Hezekiah appointed combat commanders over the people and gathered them together to him in the square at the gate of the city and spoke encouragingly to them, saying, "Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid or dismayed before King Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, and all the horde that is with him. For there is one greater with us than with him." With King Sennacherib is an arm of flesh, Hezekiah said. But with us is the Lord our God to help us and to fight our battles. Now that, my friends, is a speech. Eat your heart out, William Wallace. This speech is so good that when the people of Jerusalem, who have lost 4 battles in a row and are currently surrounded and outnumbered by the Assyrian Empire, they feel encouraged by the words of King Hezekiah. Encouraged? How on earth do you feel encouragement when you are under siege? Well, there's only one way that you can feel encouraged when death is at your doorstep. Hezekiah took the throne 14 years before he gave this speech. Over those 14 years, he did everything he could to prepare for an Assyrian invasion. Not only that, but he got the people of Judah involved, and they approached this daunting situation thinking, you know what, we're probably going to die, but we're going to do everything we can to give us a chance to live. And after 14 years of digging tunnels, reinforcing walls, strategizing, and mass production, the people stopped feeling despair and started to feel hope. Hezekiah inherited a demoralized people. He said to them, you know what I have? I have hope. And 14 years later, the people of Jerusalem said overwhelmingly in unison, and we have hope too. They say this in 701 BCE, while Assyria is trying to starve them to death. And I have to tell you, I get emotional when I read this. I mean, this is what leadership is all about, right? The people of Judah have no reason to feel even the faintest pangs of hope. But here they are, believing that their story isn't over. Before we go any further in this story, we need to pause and remember that Hezekiah's leadership and the character of the people of Jerusalem moved from a terrifying amount of despair to an overflowing amount of hope in just 14 years. This is remarkable, and it is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The only problem is, it's hard to celebrate this accomplishment because, you know, Jerusalem is under siege from Assyria. And even though the people of Jerusalem are all happy and hopeful now, they're about to die. And as grim as things look, and as much as we want to give up hope, we look at them having hope and we say, well, that's nice, but you know, it's kind of time for you guys to go. But it's here that everything changes. And I have to tell you, you will not believe what happens next. I know that's true because I don't believe what happens next. Because after an unspecified amount of time under siege, we read, then King Hezekiah and the prophet Isaiah, son of Amoz, prayed because of the siege, and they cried to heaven. And the Lord sent an angel who cut off all the mighty warriors and commanders and officers in the camp of the king of Assyria. So King Sennacherib returned in disgrace to his own land. And just like that, the Assyrian siege is over. Against all odds, Judah actually wins. And Judah is convinced that the reason they won is because God intervened on their behalf. I mean, can you blame them for believing this? If you lived in Jerusalem in 701 BCE, wouldn't you think the same thing? One day you're under siege by the Assyrian Empire, and then you wake up the next morning, and all of Assyria is packing up and heading home? If that's not a miracle, then how else would you explain the Assyrians leaving? Now, if you've been with us at Paradox before, you know that we encounter stories like this all the time in the Bible. The Bible is filled with stories about God intervening in the human battlefield and giving victory to ensure that God's will is enacted on earth. So it's easy to dismiss the story of King Hezekiah and Assyria and place it in the category of other battles in the Bible, like the Battle of Mount Zemaraim, the Battle of Rephidim, and the Battle of Jericho. But let me tell you something. To put the story of the Assyrian siege of Jerusalem in the same category as those other battles would be a colossal mistake. Because unlike those other stories, we have archaeological evidence that this story historically occurred. The Bible tells us the story of the Assyrian siege from Judah's perspective. But we also have a record of this story from the Assyrian perspective. This is Sennacherib's prism. And because colonialism is a terrible thing, it's of course in the British Museum in London. Now this cylinder is how the Assyrians recorded their history. Archaeologists date this cylinder back to somewhere around the year 690 BCE, or just 10 years after the siege of Jerusalem. This is remarkable because the siege of Jerusalem was recorded in Chronicles nearly 350 years after the siege occurred. This is only 10 years away from when this happened. Now on this cylinder, we read about a plethora of cities that King Sennacherib first placed under siege and then eventually conquered. We read about how Chaldea was surrounded and conquered, how Joppa was surrounded and conquered, how Sidka was surrounded and conquered, and so on and so forth. After reading this pattern over and over again, we finally arrive to the city of Jerusalem. And the cylinder, written from Sennacherib's perspective, brags, "Like a caged bird, I shut Hezekiah up in Jerusalem, his royal city." But here the cylinder breaks from the pattern established in this record and does not mention at all that Jerusalem was eventually conquered. Instead, the cylinder moves on to the next exploits of conquests of Sennacherib. Both the prism and the Bible verify that Assyria placed Jerusalem under siege. Both the prism and the Bible verify that Assyria never conquered Jerusalem. And both the prism and the Bible verify that Assyria lifted the siege and went home. Now, both records, unsurprisingly, claim victory in their own way. But between these two records, as well as several other archaeological verifications, we can say with a great level of certainty that these historical facts happened. Jerusalem was surrounded by Assyria in the year 701 BCE. And then Assyria decided to lift the siege before conquering Jerusalem. Now, what would cause Assyria to just pack up and allow Jerusalem to live after spending all this money to place Jerusalem under siege? Now, some historians believe that the Assyrians got dysentery from the contaminated water. I've seen others who have knowledge of this situation posit that mice invaded the Assyrian camps and spread a highly contagious and deadly disease. And I've heard people of faith insist that an angel intervened on Judah's behalf, as the biblical record suggests. But the fact is, none of us really know why Assyria left. In regards to the siege of Jerusalem, we don't know for sure what happened, but we do know for sure that something happened. This is rather stunning because this story is about the closest we get to having a large-scale miracle in the Bible confirmed by archaeology. Well, I mean, except creation itself, but that's another story for another time. But while we are unsure if an angel actually intervened and stopped the Assyrians, or mice showed up and spread a disease among the Assyrians, there is a durable inspiration in this story that transcends time and speaks to our despair in 2020. Because Hezekiah found hope in a hopeless situation. He believed that Judah could beat Assyria. And for 14 years, he committed to that hope. And that crazy king ended up being right. Judah beat Assyria. Now, the question that the story of Hezekiah leaves me asking today is, how do we hope in a year filled with despair? That's really what we're after. If 715 BCE is our spiritual annual cousin, how is it that we can find hope in a year filled with despair? To answer that question, I want to talk about the summit of human achievement in philosophy in 2020, which is, of course, season 16 of The Bachelorette. Now, this year's Bachelorette is a woman named Claire Crawley. And Claire, at 39 years young, is the oldest Bachelorette in the show's history. Which is only one reason for the tagline, for this season is, it's about time. The second reason that this tagline was selected is because this is Claire's fifth time being on a Bachelorette show in an effort to find the love of her life. You know the old saying, if at first you don't succeed, try, and then try again to find love on a reality TV show. Anyways, due to the pandemic, this season took place in a bubble with strict testing and isolation. The bubble that the producers selected was at La Quinta Resort in Palm Springs in the middle of July, which is why everyone is sweating all the time. On the first night, Claire met all of the guys that would be vying for her heart over the next several weeks. But when she first saw Dale step out of the limo, the whole contest was over. She immediately turned to Chris Harrison and said, "I think I just met my husband." And from that moment forward, Claire zeroed in on Dale. She skipped all of the formalities, and after just 2 weeks, she told the viewing public and Chris Harrison that she was ready to dump all the other guys and commit to Dale for the rest of her life. Which is exactly what she did. She dumped 15 men at the same time, told them that she was in love with Dale and only Dale, and that she would be leaving the bubble, the show, and all of them. Claire then walked out of the room, and after her departure, high comedy ensued. All 15 men, who were just dumped together, started telling each other and the cameras about their own personal devastation. I laughed out loud because these guys maybe spent 22 hours collectively with Claire, but they all acted like they had just gone through a divorce with their spouse that they had been married to for 17 years. My favorite comment was by a contestant named Blake, who, with tears in his eyes, said to the other contestants shortly after being dumped by Claire, "When I found out that the Bachelorette was Claire, I bought a book on dementia and Alzheimer's to understand what she was going through with her mom." He continued, "I fully dove in to make sure that I could potentially be that fairy tale ending if I got there. Why did I invest so much and not get anything in return?" I love this existential question from Blake. One of my favorite things about this quote is that Blake never mentions whether or not he read the book. He only mentions that he bought the book. Now, what reaction do you think might happen if we could transcend time and Blake's loss on investment from this book, and we could all of a sudden have his complaint heard by King Hezekiah? After laughing, I think Hezekiah would say to Blake, "Blake, you call buying a book on Amazon an investment? How much did that cost you, Blake? $14.99? Try investing 14 years into your unlikely survival, and then be prepared to ask the question, why did I invest so much and not get anything in return while your city is destroyed, your family is dead, and you are on your way to Assyria as a prisoner of war. Because remember, Blake, we had no guarantee that we were going to beat the Assyrians. All we had was the hope that we might be able to beat them. We spent 14 years, Blake, trusting that hope, living in that hope, and walking with that hope. That's the kind of investment that we, the people of Judah, made in 715 BCE. Now, I point out the contrast between King Hezekiah and Blake Moynes because both of these stories teach us about hope and despair. Blake finds someone attractive, but before he can go on a date with her, she is in love with someone else. He immediately falls into despair. He questions his life choices. He wonders why the world can be so cruel, and he begins to think that he will never find love. What Blake teaches us is that despair is the easiest and the laziest option. Anybody can despair. Anyone can be cynical. Anyone can easily stand up and say, everything sucks. But hope, well, hope requires something different. We ask the question, how do we hope in a year filled with despair? And if we are to take a lesson from the story of Hezekiah seriously, we know that all of Judah's survival stems from Hezekiah's conviction that begins with the belief that Judah can beat the empire of Assyria. If this morning you are feeling overwhelmed with despair, the very first step in your journey toward hope is to begin with a strong conviction of hope. Now, I could stand up here and tell you about my personal convictions of hope, but I'm telling you, they won't help you that much. This is something that you have to believe from the core of your being. And if you adopt one of my convictions, you may try it for a week or two and then say, this doesn't work, and then run right back to the easiest path, which is despair. Instead, you and I need to spend some time asking ourselves, what hope can I hold on to that is worth spending a lifetime to pursue? And this question then leads us to the next step of how we hope in a year filled with despair. Because Hezekiah held a strong conviction of hope. But then every day for the next 14 years, the people of Judah woke up and put their hope into tangible action. After we have our convictions, we can live with hope instead of despair by making a daily commitment to acting on that hope for years to come. The story of Hezekiah teaches us that hope requires a coordination of the mind and the body. We must passionately believe that there is something good about our existence. And then we must also put that belief into a daily action to work toward what it is that we hope to be true about the universe. This is the wisdom of Hezekiah's story. This is the testimony of the people of Jerusalem who survived 715 and 701 BCE. And this is how we hope in a year filled with despair. So if you are struggling with hope and feel yourself overwhelmed in this year of 2020, then I'd like to talk to you about step one of this two-step process. My friend Casey recently recommended the singer-songwriter John Lucas to me. His work took my breath away. John Lucas's songs have the depths of crafted sermons and the beauty of vibrant paintings. On his newest record, the opening meditative track invites us further in with the lyrics, "We walk in the garden, we walk in the garden, we walk in the garden, though we know it not, though we know it not." In preparation for this sermon, I emailed John Lucas and asked if he would be willing to share this inspiration behind the song. He graciously wrote back to me and told me it was about a mystical experience in an encounter with God while he was in Thailand. He wrote to me, "When we begin to see the face of God within all, when we see the holiness of the soil, and all that has been, we begin to move differently. I believe that we are not created separate from God as many are taught, needing to find a path of salvation and wholeness. Instead, I believe that we are already, without reserve, one with God. And salvation is just the awakening of this knowledge. I think that this salvation is a daily choice to see God in all, in those we love, strangers, enemies, and ourselves. Most days I utterly fail to see, but sometimes I know I have caught the face of God, that I am transcending time and the divisions of my ego and this earth, and that I am walking with the Creator in the cool of the morning. If you are struggling to find hope this morning, may I invite you to take a silent walk at your earliest convenience in the morning through a garden. And while you walk through that garden, in the cool of the morning, repeat to yourself, God is here in this garden. Look at the trees and the squirrels and the dirt and the views and see how it is all connected. See how it is all one and how all of it exists to be experienced by your senses in that precious, fleeting moment that is the present. Because if we can begin to walk through a garden in this way, then we can begin to believe that this world is a good world and that it is good to be alive. In my sanctified imagination, I picture Hezekiah waking up in the morning and going on a walk through Jerusalem. This walk takes place before the city is really alive with the hustle and bustle of the day. And with each passing step, King Hezekiah looks around at the structures, the history, and the culture of his people. And he probably thinks to himself, God is here in this very city. And that meditative practice inspires him to believe that Jerusalem isn't done yet, that Judah will somehow prevail against Assyria. And then Hezekiah spends the rest of his day building that hope into a reality. Here we are in 2020, with a pandemic raging, racial injustice and inequality, a homophobic Supreme Court, and a political party that seems completely fine with a demagogue being in charge. The path of despair is the path of least resistance. It's easy for us to go down that road. But I think the best thing that you and I can do in 2020 is to take a walk every morning and look at all of creation around us and whisper to ourselves with each step, God is here in this year. We then return to our work, to our lives, and to our days, putting that conviction into flesh and blood action. And maybe, just maybe, that action will lead us to a miracle, the likes of which occurred in 701 BCE, that is overflowing with justice, overflowing with peace, overflowing with mercy, overflowing with beauty, and overflowing with love. And may we witness that kind of miracle in our lifetime. May we eschew despair. May we hope courageously. And may we see and embrace Jesus Christ in all, in the garden, in the city, and in this year. Amen.
forest, our brother, the river, the spirit, it joins us together. We walk in the garden, though we know it not. Though we know it not, no. God is our Father, the earth is our mother, the soil our sister, the earth is our brother, the river, the spirit, it's joined us together. We walk in the garden, though we know it not, no. Though we know it not, though we know it not, though we know it not, we walk in the garden, though we know it not.
Thank you so much for participating in church with us this morning. We hope that this conversation and this text and this sermon has helped to start a discussion rather than end one. And if you'd like to continue the discussion, you are all welcome to join us on Instagram, where I'll be answering any of your questions. Our handle is @ParadoxRedlands. We'd love to see you there. But every week we take communion together to remind us that all of this is connected and that there is hope in the midst of years filled with despair. The bread and the cup remind us that God is with us in all that we experience as humans. And so when we take communion this morning, my prayer is that you will feel connected, that you will feel optimistic, and that you will feel hopeful in what God is creating in the world today, even though this is a year filled with despair. So with that in mind, I invite you to take the bread, which is Christ's body. Take and eat. And the cup, which is Christ's blood. Take and drink. Will you bow your heads with me? Dear God, we come before you this morning a little flustered, a little off balance, and a little filled with despair. We ask that you meet us in the midst of our despair, in the depths of our despair, and that you begin to give us hope just a little bit, enough to be convicted to start moving forward. Inspire us to turn that hope into action and to give us a miracle, the likes of which the world has never seen, just like you did in 701 BCE, halfway across the world. In your name we pray, amen. May you see hope is all around you and that Christ is right by your side. Amen.